David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We reached a new high or a new low, depending on your perspective, in the United States in the growth of income inequality. And the 400 richest Americans are now paying a lower total tax rate, federal, state, and local, than any other income group. This is based on 2018 data, which has now been analyzed. There's a really good piece in the New York Times by David Leonhardt, I'm not exactly sure how he pronounces his last name, about this. And when you look at the data and the visualizations of the data, back in 1950, the top 400 richest Americans paid the most in taxes when you combined federal, state, and local. 50 years later, even in the year 2000, the richest 400 didn't pay the highest total rates, but it was still a much higher rate than the poor and middle class. You still had the very rich, but not quite as rich as the richest 400, paying slightly higher rates than the richest 400. But no question that those richest 400 were paying a higher total rate, federal, state, and local, than lower income earners. And then last year in 2018, the richest 400 actually paid the lowest total rate of any income group. Now, you might see that, you might hear me say this and wonder, how is that possible? Because when you look at the federal tax brackets for 2018, for example, we see that the tax bracket is highest at 37% for those earning over $500,000. But what you need to understand is that we're talking here about a group, the richest 400, that is so far above the entryway to that top bracket of 500,000 that they have so many different mechanisms for deductions and loopholes and exclusions and the moving around of money on paper that they now are paying the lowest combined federal, state, and local rate of any income group. Now, let's discuss a common argument that we hear from the American right wing, which is, listen, whatever rules you pass, whatever tax law you change, the rich will figure out a way to avoid those taxes. So what's the point? They'll get better accountants. They will somehow figure out a way to avoid those taxes. This is completely untrue. Number one, look at the historical numbers I just showed you, right? I mean, the rich have historically not avoided all taxes and paid the lowest rates. They used to pay more than lower income brackets. So historically, we know that that argument is bogus. Number two, and I should mention, we're talking about the very, very rich here. We're talking about the richest 400, the richest 0.1%. We are not talking about a doctor making $300,000. Okay, that's not who we're talking about here. And it's important to understand that there is a distinction here. Number two, historically, attempts to collect more taxes have worked. We know that when we look at historical tax collections. And number three, if the rich could just avoid any new taxes, why would they work so hard? Why would they spend so much time and money and political capital fighting new taxes? Because they know that they would be affected by them. So that argument is a completely bogus and ridiculous argument. These are basically just choices to be made by societies. And the trick, of course, by the very rich and corporations and the upper class is to foment class warfare down below. This has always been the technique. You hear from some brainwashed right-wingers that the left of the middle class and the lower middle class, the poor, are the ones fighting and pushing, race warfare, class warfare, that if it weren't for them, then everything would just be completely fine. But understand that this is a technique that the very rich use. Look at the battle between American-born restaurant and agricultural workers and so-called illegals from Latin America coming here to steal your jobs. That is a battle that corporate America and the super rich and the upper class want you to be having. Why? Because if you, as an American-born restaurant worker, are fighting against the idea of some hardworking Mexican dad coming here to, quote, steal your job, you are not going to be fighting the actual people that are deciding policy and that are controlling the system and maintaining the status quo. It is by design. Another example, while the super rich and corporate media talk about millennials are lazy and this and that, it's the super rich who win by being ignored. They take the focus off of the fact that the student loan burden on millennials is astronomical. They remove any discussion whatsoever of how the ratio between the cost of college and the salary one expects to earn has fallen completely out of whack compared to what it was 30, 40 years ago. This is all by design, and it is really important that we not allow that to distract us from what actually needs to be done when it comes to policy. Because when we're having the wrong debate, they win. That's the sick genius of it. They don't care who wins these false debates, right? If you're a big corporation and you benefit from cheap labor and deregulation of labor and all of this stuff, do you care whether the, quote, illegals win against the poor American-born white people in the battle around who's going to steal whose job? No. The fact that it's a battle that is even going on means that you win. And this is what we fundamentally have to understand when we look at these numbers. So inequality certainly getting worse and worse, partially on the back of a tax code that now has the richest 400 Americans in the lowest total tax bracket when you combine federal, state, and local. Today, we have a proposal from Bernie Sanders that is an area where he really stands out in the Democratic field. It's his plan to get money out of politics. Now, let's set up the conversation. We've been having a practical discussion here on this show for a while now about Bernie versus Warren on accepting corporate and PAC money. Now, both Bernie and Warren have turned it down in primaries. Elizabeth Warren has said she would accept it in the general election, saying she doesn't believe in unilateral disarmament. And if this is the way to win, she thinks we are better off with her accepting that money and winning rather than turning it down and losing and seeing Donald Trump reelected. Bernie has said he would not accept that money in the general election. And this has become a sort of battleground on the issue of campaign finance reform. Now, I want money out of politics, period. I don't have to qualify it in any other way. Money in politics is a toxic and corrosive force. It needs to be done away with. It needs to be removed. It needs to be reformed. And I do believe that it is a conversation to have about whether by unilaterally disarming in the general election, you risk losing the election, and whether it is short-sighted in the sense that by getting into office, if you accept that money in the general, you might then be able to change the system. Now, this is a theoretical conversation. I'm not looking to fight anyone over it. There are reasonable positions to be had on both sides. But I still think that if you win, you have to work to get rid of money in politics and to change and fix campaign finance. I don't know that Elizabeth Warren would do that. But this is a very specific conversation to this election about primarily two candidates. Of the three frontrunners, Biden's certainly not going to do anything about this. The right thing to do is we need money out of politics, and Bernie Sanders has put out an absolutely fantastic plan to do it. Bernie's plan is all-encompassing in that it would restructure money in politics when it comes to parties and conventions and inaugurations, which, by the way, inaugurations for Donald Trump have served as a great way to funnel money for influence peddling, for buying influence. It would restructure public financing of elections, primary debate funding, Congress, everything. So let's look at the details. Number one, Bernie would end corporate contributions to the Democratic convention, period. This is already just a great way to set the tone before you even formally nominate someone. This is absolutely a great thing to be doing. Bernie would end corporate donations to the DNC, period, and to inaugurations, and individual donations to inaugurations would be capped at $500. Excellent. Bernie would make federal elections publicly funded. This is like the big boy, right? This is the real hallmark of any serious plan to get money out of politics and to fix the problems that we have. Bernie would get rid of the Federal Elections Commission and instead would replace it with a federal election administration with a governing body of its own. Bernie also wants a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. That's not unique to Bernie. Bernie wants to end super PACs by legislation. And this is a very interesting component of the plan. Bernie would install a universal small dollar voucher system, which would, quote, give any voting age American the ability to donate to federal candidates. This is empowering people in a way that not only are you democratizing the financing of elections, you are also hopefully, by getting people involved in supporting candidates with money they wouldn't ordinarily even necessarily have to donate, you're making it more likely they're actually going to participate in the system by voting, which is a major problem in this country. Bernie would ban advertising during primary debates, and he would put in place a lifelong lobbying ban on former members of Congress actually doing the thing that Donald Trump claimed he would do but hasn't actually done. These are the big elements. It's not all encompassing. There are a few more. So here's the reality. I always want to just talk about the reality with you and not dance around what it is that's going on. In polling, Elizabeth Warren is surging. She has overtaken Joe Biden in a number of recent polls, and she may soon overtake the lead in the 2020 Democratic primary. Bernie and Warren are sort of fighting for the progressive vote. Either would be the most progressive president that we have ever had. But we can't ignore that on this issue, Bernie is unparalleled in the Democratic primary, period. There's no need to qualify it further. Every time I say something objective about Bernie or Warren, people email me, David, I'm disappointed. I'm going to not watch anymore because, I'm a Bernie guy and you're really going to Warren. Or I'm not going to watch anymore because I'm for Warren and now you're just propping up Bernie. You're a Bernie bro, David. Or I'm angry because you're, trying to hurt Bernie or attacking Warren or whatever. I am communicating the facts. Warren is surging in the polls. Bernie is unparalleled on this issue of money in politics, and this plan is an extraordinarily strong framework. And to quote Donald Trump, I hope that whoever is the next president looks at this very, very strongly, because it is one of the foremost issues. If we want to really fix politics, this has to be at the top of the list, along with, of course, climate change and dealing with systemic and structural wealth and income inequality in this country. We are doing something very exciting over the weekend. We haven't done this for like a year. We are going to be having a one-day membership fund drive, blowing out memberships at a historic discount. If you have been thinking about getting a membership to the David Pakman Show, which is our number one funding source, of course, get on our mailing list by signing up for the newsletter at davidpakman.com. This weekend, you will get an email. The subject will probably be, I don't know, that I haven't written it yet. That email you've been waiting for, and it will contain a one-day coupon code to get the biggest membership discount of the year. We've got to boost membership. We are ramping up for the 2020 election. We want to be doing a lot of new things once I'm fully recovered from my emergency appendectomy, of course. And membership is the way that we fund all of that. So get on the mailing list at davidpakman.com. Major discount coming up this weekend. And of course, follow me on Twitter at dpakman and follow the show on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Chris Johnson and Natalia Elfont. I really appreciate your support. Membership, of course, responsible for 40%, a plurality of our revenue. I hope you'll sign up at joinpakman.com. Today's longtime sustainer of the day is Scott Reichhoff. Scott's been a member for almost 5 years. Thank you, Scott. Join today at joinpakman.com, and we will have a massive membership blowout this weekend. If you want to be notified about how to take advantage of that, sign up for our newsletter at davidpakman.com. We have had in the last 24 hours an absolutely unhinged, unrestricted, unfettered, rampaging Donald Trump, who has threatened to obliterate the Turkish economy. We have the tweets. Why is Trump talking about obliterating a country's economy that he can't even find on a map? Because it all relates to pulling American troops from Syria. And I'll explain, and we will have a discussion about it. Donald Trump, once again, has brought up this issue of pulling troops from Syria. He's been talking about this for some time now. And Donald Trump made the announcement that he is pulling back troops from the north of Syria and allowing Turkey to do a military offensive in the area. Now, there are even supporters of Donald Trump's that are saying this makes no damn sense. This includes Republican presidential brown-noser Lindsey Graham. This includes Brian Kilmeade on Fox News. We'll get to that a little bit later. But Donald Trump took to Twitter and said, don't worry, if Turkey does anything I don't like, I will destroy their economy. Nice, right? Even crazier is that in threatening to obliterate their economy, Trump patted himself on the back for being a genius and also referenced previously destroying economies. I don't even know that I understand what he says here. Let's take a look. Quote, as I have stated strongly before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, this is someone with a deep, deep, deep problem, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done before. They must, with Europe and others, watch over the captured ISIS fighters and families. The U.S. has done far more than anyone could have expected, including the capture of 100% of the ISIS caliphate. It is time now for others in the region, some of great wealth, to protect their own territory. The USA is great. Incredible stability evidenced by these tweets, right? I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. Also, what does he mean I've done before? Does he mean he's previously destroyed Turkey's economy? Does he mean he's previously threatened to destroy Turkey's economy? Does he mean that he's previously destroyed other economies? I don't know what he means. And this is not merely just more Trump insanity. There are not only really important policy things to discuss with this entire Syria thing. Within hours of Donald Trump doing this, Turkey has already attacked Kurdish positions in northern Syria, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Trump originally said we're getting out of Syria. And you had rightists say that that's good because they just like anything that Donald Trump says. You had some rightists say it's bad because they are wanting more troops in as many places as possible. You had some leftists say, good, anytime Trump wants troops out of somewhere, we should support it. But the real analysis required more nuance. We are against, as progressives, we are against pointless, counterproductive, indefinite, sometimes illegal military engagements. No question, no argument from me. In the big picture, we want troops out of Syria. But when Trump does it with seemingly no strategic imperative or timing or common sense, we should be concerned about why it's happening. What was the strategic reason to pull troops unilaterally when Trump said he was going to do it? I don't even know if it was months or a year ago at this point in time. We never found one, although there were significant sort of motive elements that we could find that related to Russia, and they related to Turkey, and they possibly related to Trump's business dealings in Turkey, could relate to Khashoggi now. I mean, we'll talk about that. And now the reason for this particular pullback is to let Turkey run an operation which Trump is already threatening to destroy their economy over if he doesn't like how it goes. Does anybody else see how bipolar and ridiculous and nonsensical this is? And I was going to tell you at this point in the story, we will see what the next shoe to drop is. We actually know what it is within hours of this announcement. Turkey struck Kurdish targets in northern Syria, and we're going to discuss that next. And if you're counting on Trump's stable genius to figure out or to try to even parse this in any way for you, good luck. So Turkey has now struck Kurdish targets in northeastern Syria, according to a new report. Now, when we say, as I just discussed with you, we all want to be out of Syria, but if we just bail, Turkey will attack the Kurds, it's not a hypothetical political consideration. It's not some random way to try to criticize what Donald Trump does. It's real. And in fact, it happened within hours of the United States pulling troops from northern Syria in conjunction with Donald Trump's announcement, right after even some Republicans said, wait a second. What about the Kurds? Turkey has already struck targets belonging to Kurdish opposition groups in the northeast of Syria. Right now, the north of Syria is controlled by the Kurdish SDF, that's Syrian Democratic Forces. They are our allies. They've been fighting ISIS. This is what, better said, a lot of Trumpists don't get, who just continue to see all of this as team sports. The actions of Trump have real world consequences. And you have these sort of reflexive defenses of anything that Donald Trump does, no matter what it is. But then you see that the impact is real. Trump pulls troops, Turkey bombs the Kurds. Now, Trump said, we have the tweet, that he would obliterate Turkey's economy if they do the wrong thing to the Kurds. We looked at the tweet last segment. Let's look at it one more time. As I have strongly stated before, Trump tweeted yesterday, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the capital E economy of Turkey. I've done before. We still don't know what that I've done before means. None of this is surprising. We've known for a long time that Turkey and Erdogan wanted to attack the Kurds. Now there is a very obvious and cynical analysis to be made. I will present it to you. There are Trump towers in Turkey. Erdogan knows something about the Khashoggi killing that would be bad for Trump to have go public, given that Trump did nothing with regard to Saudi Arabia after we found out about Saudi Arabia's responsibility in that killing. Both Putin and Erdogan want Syria's regime to stand. So this becomes a really clever geopolitical proxy to repress the Kurds, a more egalitarian society in support of dictator Bashar al-Assad. And Trump is the perfect patsy to fold under the most minor pressure. That's one analysis, okay? And that accounts for like 95% of what we know and what we're seeing. It would explain 95% of the factors. Now, let me address another issue. There are some leftists who are saying Trump derangement syndrome is making leftists defend troops in Syria. Trump has so rattled the left that he is making the left be in favor of forever wars just to oppose Donald Trump. When did the left become warmongers is another way that it's being said. Stop. Back up a second, okay? This is a very specific situation that we are analyzing here. Noam Chomsky, no hero of American imperialism and military expansion, has said it makes sense for the U.S. to maintain a presence in Syria right now to deter attacks against the Kurds. To pretend that recognizing the folly of this decision by Donald Trump is a militaristic decision of expanding forever wars is extraordinarily myopic. And it's also dangerous to the Kurds to start pushing lines like that. Geopolitics is complicated, much more complicated than troops anywhere are bad. Get them all out anytime, no matter what, no matter why. Please apply a little more thought to what is going on here, because it is, listen, we expect the right to be making completely ridiculous, fact-free analyses of what we are seeing take place on the foreign policy stage, whether they reflexively defend any decision that Trump makes, whether they reflexively favor and support anything that involves putting the military in different places. We expect this from them. The really disgusting thing that I don't want to see is the left starting to eat itself over analyses that make no sense. This is not about opposing Trump and therefore supporting forever wars or endless indefinite military engagements. It's just not. This is about understanding what even people like Noam Chomsky are saying and recognizing that they're with Trump, as always, maybe other factors, financial factors, leverage factors, etc., that are not being publicized that could very much inform why we're seeing what we're seeing. We'll be tracking the fallout. Make sure that you're following The David Pakman Show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, follow me at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Donald Trump has suffered a major loss, and we've taken one giant step towards seeing Donald Trump's tax returns. And Donald Trump is furious, and he has been ordered to turn over 8 years of his and his company's tax returns. And I'll explain the entire trajectory to you. I've told you before, the Manhattan District Attorney is investigating Donald Trump's company for criminality and requested a bunch of personal and corporate tax returns. Trump immediately sued to stop the release of those taxes. A federal judge has now dismissed the lawsuit, meaning that unless Donald Trump can come up with some new reason to block the release of those returns to the Manhattan DA, he is going to have to provide them. Or will he, right? Because what I mean is the consequences for Trump so far for just not doing what he's told when it comes to providing documents have been zero. But it is a step in the right direction. The argument that Donald Trump made to prevent the release of these tax returns was that as president, he is immune not just from criminal prosecution, which of course he believes, but that's a broader question, but that he is immune also from even being criminally investigated, period. Now, Judge Victor Marrero, Hispanic guy, Trump might lose it. Anyway, Judge Victor Marrero says that that's not going to fly, rejected the argument altogether, and says Trump's got to provide the tax returns. And in the immediate hours that followed, Donald Trump's lawyers appealed it, and the U.S. Circuit Court has granted Donald Trump a stay, saying, okay, if you're appealing it, we will delay forcing Trump to provide those tax returns. But this is now one bullet that's been fired by Trump, and the bullet has missed. Trump, of course, furious, blaming radical left Democrats on Twitter, saying, quote, the radical left Democrats, capital R, capital L, naturally, have failed on all fronts. So now they are pushing local New York City and state Democrat prosecutors to go get President Trump. A thing like this has never happened to any president before, not even close. So what's going to happen here? I'm going to give you like the realist assessment of what I think is going to go down. I believe that Donald Trump will use every single option that he can. He will exhaust every crazy notion to avoid having to provide these tax returns. And meanwhile, he will further the witch hunt narrative like he did on Russia, like he's doing on Ukraine. There's a good chance, it's not 100%, but there's a good chance that at some point a judge will say, listen, legally, you've got to provide your tax returns to investigators. They will then put out, just like the Barr letter, just like the truncated memo about the Ukraine phone call, they will put out some completely edited tax returns that he will claim are complete records. And then investigators and Democrats will correctly say, no, but this is BS. These are completely incomplete. And then Trump will say, look, I finally give them to you and you still don't like them. And before you know it, it'll be the 2020 election and Donald Trump will win re-election. That's a combination of realistic and sort of cynical assessment, which I do happen to think is actually the most likely assessment of what's going to go on here. And in the end, we will get back to what is in Trump's taxes that he has so desperately and for so many years fought tooth and nail to prevent their release. And the answer is several things. Speculation. But if we wonder, given what we know about Trump, given what we know about Trump's ego, given what we know about Trump's shady business connections, to use a very light term that is probably too understated, we could learn from Trump's taxes that he is not nearly as wealthy as he claims. We could learn from Trump's taxes, I mean, it's almost guaranteed, that he inflates the values of assets to get loans and that those assets actually aren't worth that much. And on the taxes, he may even understate the values of those assets. We may learn the names of the shell companies and all sorts of forensic accounting leads for more things to look into. We could learn about various types of fraud because what is on Trump's taxes may not be in line with other financial disclosures and loan applications and things that Donald Trump has previously disclosed. There are many possibilities here, but let me say this, because apparently this is totally legal and totally cool to say now. Kurdish hackers, if you're listening, Icelandic hackers, whoever, if you're listening, if you were to find Donald Trump's taxes, I believe the media would greatly reward you. Trump said it about Hillary's emails to Russia. Can't be anything wrong with me saying it to Kurdish hackers and Icelandic hackers about Donald Trump's taxes. Just saying, I'm guessing the media would greatly reward you. A major former Trump staffer is now predicting that Donald Trump will ultimately resign the presidency of the United States. And I'm going to have her comments for you in a moment. But listen, we've talked about this before. Every time I say this, I get a few angry emails. I don't think Trump is going to be removed by impeachment. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Donald Trump is going to resign. But I do believe that if Donald Trump started to seriously believe that he was at risk of being removed and possibly facing criminal prosecution, I think that is the one scenario under which he might resign. The former vice president of the Trump organization, Barbara Ress, is saying exactly this, that Trump is acting just the way he used to act at the Trump organization, the paranoia, the anger flying off the handle, and that he might resign specifically to save face. She said this to CNN. Check it out.
And when Kellyanne Conway's husband says he's unfit for office, do you agree with that assessment?
I do, yes. But I thought that when he was running, and not for necessarily the mental reasons that they talk about, but because he didn't have the experience, lots of different things.
So how do you see this ending now? Does it end at the ballot box in a year? Does he make it to a second term? Does he resign as a result of impeachment? What do you think?
It's funny. People ask me that, and I'm thinking, it's hard to say my opinion on national TV because I could very well be wrong. But let me tell you what I thought. I think that he does a lot of things to save face, and I could give you examples, but we don't have time. But there are some things that, he can't control, and he's now at the point where he can't control this. He can't do anything about this. It would be very, very, very bad for him to be impeached. I don't know that he'd be found guilty, but I don't think he wants to be impeached. I think that's what this panic is about. And my gut tells me he'll leave office, he'll resign, or make some kind of a deal even, depending on what comes out.
The deal thing is a bigger and bigger part of this. Once again, I don't believe that this is heading to an impeachment conviction. Some in my audience disagree with me. But as soon as that becomes a reality, if it ever does, we immediately start getting into, does Trump pull Pence down with him? Does Trump set Mike Pence up to pardon him if he preemptively resigns? Does he pull Pence down but make a deal for Pence's replacement with someone that will pardon him? And then there's also a completely opposite assessment of all of this, which some people are making, which is even though Trump doesn't like the idea of articles of impeachment, there is a position to be staked out, which I think is a reasonable one, that a failed impeachment attempt or even an inquiry that doesn't go well could re-energize Donald Trump's base. It could get some Republicans who are sort of lukewarm on Trump to just bite the bullet and vote for the guy. That is not a crazy prediction about how this could go. Now, as far as how, the Barbara Rez thing goes, of course, right away, Trumpists are attacking her. She's clearly not clued into what Trump would do. She just wants to malign Trump. She doesn't really know Trump. I even saw some comments online saying Trump would never sleep with this woman. Is that even at issue here? I didn't think that was on the table. Anyway, this is not a particularly difficult to believe assessment. I believe that Donald Trump will do anything he can to not only avoid impeachment, but to avoid resignation. But if it really came down to it, if the rubber really started meeting the road, Trump might resign to avoid an impeachment conviction. Nixon did it. It's not a shocking thing to think might happen if it went that way. But it's nice to see that the Trumpists immediately identify personal attacks against a woman as the way to defend Donald Trump against any critical statement against their dear leader. Completely predictable in every way. Barbara Ress, let me know what you think. I basically agree with her. I think where I disagree with Barbara Ress is I don't believe this scenario will come to pass. I do agree that to save face, a cornered Trump who believes he will be removed by impeachment would resign. I just don't believe it's going to get to that point. Let me know what you think. Make sure you are following the show on Twitch at twitch.tv/David Pakman. Live streams will be resuming soon. Quick break, back after this with much more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I have video for you today of a longtime Trump brown-nosing sycophant, one of the real sick Fox News Trump defenders, realizing on live television that Trump is absolutely clueless and has no idea what he's doing. And you can actually see him become more and more enraged, despite being someone who is almost exclusively wrong on policy. I'm talking, of course, of Brian Kilmeade, the one that some people think is the dumb one on Fox and Friends, but it may not actually be the case. And of course, there is a lot of competition for that role, that designation on Fox and Friends. We've been talking about Donald Trump's recent decision to pull back troops in northern Syria to allow Turkey to run a military operation, along with Donald Trump's threat to destroy and obliterate Turkey's economy if they do anything Donald Trump doesn't like, combined with, within hours, Turkey bombing Kurdish forces in northern Syria. We've already talked about all of that. Brian Kilmeade came up with one of the reasons why Donald Trump's actions are concerning, which is, yes, they endanger the Kurds in northern Syria, which happens to be a concern that a lot of people share. It's Noam Chomsky who shares that concern. It's me. It's some Republicans as well. And you can just tell that Brian Kilmeade is disgusted with Trump in this video. And you can also tell when you go to the wide shot, or I think it's a wide shot the entire time, when you see Steve Doocy, I always have to be careful to pronounce it correctly. When you see co-host Steve Doocy, and I believe it's Ainsley Earhart, they don't want anything to do with this. They are still fully on the sucking up to Trump train. And what's funny is that Brian Kilmeade, if you watch him deliver any political opinion, he always has like a slightly confused expression on his face. Even if he's making a roundabout point that has some element of truth, which he does in this case, he always seems like 1 microsecond away from completely losing the thread and becoming totally incoherent. And meanwhile, Steve Doocy looks visibly uncomfortable with what Kilmeade is saying. Ainsley Earhart seems to want no part in the conversation one way or another. Take a look at this.
Just what a disaster. I mean, the president's statement through Stephanie Grisham is, you know, we defeated the caliphate. The caliphate's destroyed. We would not have done that without the Kurds, who did all of our fighting. While our guys, the reason why our casualties were so low is because the Kurds did all the fighting. Now we're saying, okay, Turks, go wipe them out or force them out. What kind of message is that to the next ally that wants to side with us? Meanwhile, we're taking Sunni prisoners and giving them to Sunni Turkey, who has been nothing but irresponsible, though technically a NATO ally. A disastrous series of events. I hope the president will rethink this.
I think the president's doing exactly what he wants to, because he has made from the get-go very clear
to release ISIS fighters?
Campaign promise to end wars in other countries.
And abandon our allies?
Man, Steve Doocy as a guy to play off of is just tough, right? I mean, he sounds like a little kid. He's a 62-year-old man, but he sounds like a kid. Well, I think Trump is just doing what he wants to, so yeah. And then that riles up Kilmeade even more as we continue.
That's a campaign promise? Well, abandon the people that got the caliphate destroyed?
I think when people find out that somebody else is willing to take over the fight against ISIS, they're going to be okay with it.
Who's taking it?
Well,
Turkey.
Turkey's not going to fight ISIS.
We have given Turkey permission to do that and to take, and the quote was, Turkey will now be responsible for all ISIS fighters.
And kill and wipe out the Kurds? Are you kidding me? Again, we're abandoning our most loyal allies who did all our fighters. All we did is arm them, and they did all the work. And now we say, good luck. Good luck surviving.
Well, it looks like that's the tack the White House and the president's going to take. We're going to have...
As bad as Brian Kilmeade's political analysis is, even though he hits on something here, of course, Steve Doocy's dumb comments are just too much. Good luck surviving, Brian. That's the tactic the White House is taking. So there are these tiny little sort of hairline cracks that are forming in the echo chamber of Fox News by mere coincidence, because Kilmeade wants soldiers in Syria. Do you think that after a segment like this, when they go to commercial or after they're done filming, Do you think they go to the break room, stand around the water cooler, and they say, Brian, what was that all about? That was weird. What went on there? And what you have is, okay, Brian Kilmeade, like a clock that doesn't move, it ends up being right twice a day. And Brian Kilmeade has stumbled upon what is at least a partially correct take, and it just seems completely out of place on Fox News. Now that that's over, Fox News can resume the self-eating, by the way, which is actually the bigger media story that I think we should be talking about. I've been preparing you for this for about a year now. I think it's been about a year. It's certainly dating back to last May, if not earlier. When we start looking at the possible separation of Trump and Fox, of Trump and Republicans, you have to understand that there is much more to it than simply, will Fox support Trump in the 2020 reelection campaign? We are starting to see political disagreements that are becoming more than just public. They are starting to actually affect the way that politics is happening behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. You're starting to see Moscow Mitch separate from Trump a little bit more than he has in the past over this Syria issue. You're starting to see Looney Lindsey Graham start to distance himself from Trump a little bit, even though he was like the greatest Trump brown noser out there for a very long period of time. But it's not just forward progress, because then Trump will backpedal and he'll pull some people back in, but then it'll happen again. And we'll see what ultimately happens. I don't know. If you said to me today, David, take a position by November of 2020, will Trump and Fox still have this marriage made, not in heaven, but, with a prenup and under duress, which is, I guess, the way most of Donald Trump's relationships seem to develop. Will we still have that in November of 2020, or will we have seen a total separation between Trump and Fox News? And if so, that raises a whole host of additional questions. Will Trump have moved over to OAN, One America News Network, which I've been predicting for a while, and Trump has started to promote a little bit around the edges? Will we see those right-wing media outlets that abandoned Trump actively promote an alternative? Will they promote a Democrat? I don't think so. Will they promote a primary challenge to Trump or voting third party? I don't know. But these are some of the interesting questions that I look forward to seeing answered as the campaign continues to develop. Let me know what you think will ultimately happen. Let me know what you make, by the way, of Brian Kilmeade staking out this position, which, again, it's not unique to Kilmeade. There are lots of Republicans who want troops in Syria for different reasons. The danger to the Kurds specifically, though, is not always the one that you hear. Okay, it's been a couple weeks. Let's do some book recommendations. Backstory on this segment: I used to do these weekly. The segments did terribly on YouTube. We stopped doing them. But due to popular demand, people said, David, please bring back the book recommendations. So I'm doing this like every 2 to 3 weeks. I will remind you, and this is what hopefully will make this worthwhile to continue doing. If you go to davidpakman.com/recommendations, you will find all of these recommendations and others with Amazon links, where if you buy them through the links at davidpakman.com/recommendations, we get a slice, like Andrew Yang likes to say, a slice of an Amazon transaction. We get a slice of your Amazon transaction if you use the links at davidpakman.com/recommendations to buy these books. I've got 2 nonfiction books here and 2 fiction books. Let's get right into it. First one, nonfiction, Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. This is a great book about artificial intelligence. I believe that it was Bill Gates who had recommended this one, at least put it on my radar. Very, very good, because it is not hyperbolic. This book, Life 3.0, will take all of the different fears and hypotheses around the development of artificial intelligence, and it will sort of like simmer down and speak in much more measured ways about the risks and the possibilities of artificial intelligence. I highly recommend it. It has some parts in it that you can sort of skip depending on your knowledge of technology. I just read the entire thing, but definitely don't miss this one. Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. Second nonfiction book today. This one I read about a year ago. This is called Traffic by Tom Vanderbilt. This is a book about traffic on the roads, and it will explain to you So traffic is interesting because the concept of traffic is interesting because there are like mathematical elements to understanding why is it that we're going so slowly if there's no crash? Like what's causing this slowdown? I don't understand that. What is the most efficient means of merging when there is a merge? There are a lot of mathematical considerations around traffic, but there's also a lot of sociology and culture around how highway systems are designed in different countries. There are probably other examples that I'm forgetting here. This book discusses a lot of that. Traffic, Why We Drive the Way We Do, and What It Says About Us by Tom Vanderbilt. Get it, enjoy it. If you don't drive, you will certainly get pleasure out of taking public transit after reading this book for sure. Let's now do 2 fiction recommendations. All right, now this one, I was very hesitant to, so I in general, I'm kind of hesitant often to jump into authors that do like the massive bestsellers that sometimes feel sort of like they're for the lowest common denominator. And I don't say that in any kind of, I don't know, pejorative way, but like I've never read a Stephen King book up until a few months ago. I just kind of resisted the craze around it, whatever. This book is really worth reading. It's a big one. It is New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson. I've read nothing else by Kim Stanley Robinson in my life. This was thoroughly enjoyable without passing any judgment of any kind on any other work by Robinson. This is a great book because it combines great readability, interesting characters with the issue of climate change, climate destabilization, rising sea level, and a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with today. I don't know that I need to say much more about it, but if you're into sci-fi, if you're into climate change, dystopian sort of stuff, this is a great book. It is about 600 pages. It goes quickly. It really is a quick read, as quick as 600 pages can be. And lastly, this was recommended to me by writer Elliot Pepper, who I will sometimes trade recommendations with and whose books I've recommended before. It is called Avogadro Corp, or Avogadro Corporation is what it stands for. Avogadro Corporation in the book. This is by William Hertling. This is a placeholder for a sort of massive multinational, could be Google-like, could be Apple-like, that type of company. And it is, let's see, how much do I want to say about it? Let's just say that it takes, how Gmail now has this feature where it has predictive text if you have it turned on. As you're writing, it will consider what it is likely you are going to write and let you autofill. It will say, oh, you're probably, if you start saying, let's figure out tomorrow whether we can increase, it might add in the prices if it knows that you're often talking about increasing or decreasing prices or whatever. The book jumps off from the idea of a more advanced version of that Gmail feature that doesn't do predictive text on the basis of what it thinks you are likely to want to say, but it actually can restructure emails on the basis of who the recipient is to make them more influential when the recipient gets that email. So I might write a sales email and the function might say, oh, based on who it's going to, here's how that email could be rewritten to make it more likely that you're going to make a sale. That's the idea. And it expands from there into the problems that come from that. Really, really good. It's actually kind of good to pair this as a fiction book with Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. So check these out. All of these and many more recommendations available at davidpakman.com/recommendations. Any links you use on that page to buy these or other books, we will get a slice of those Amazon purchases, which is a really, really great thing. And I appreciate everybody who is already doing that. Okay, we have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I've had people cancel memberships or stop watching because I took the wrong political position. I've had people cancel memberships or stop watching because they don't like the format of the show or the frequency with which we produce programming or whatever. I'm not aware of anyone who has stopped watching the show because they found out my sexual orientation, but it sounds like that's what we have here. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, Mr. Packard, I'm not a solicitor or anything. I'm just
good.
a regular viewer. I've been watching you for a while, and I totally thought that you were gay. And I was really liking everything that you said, and I agreed with everything, but dude, you're not gay. I totally thought you were gay, so it just kind of crushed me when I kind of found out that you weren't. So I wish you well, and maybe I'll listen, maybe I won't, but I always had a high hope that you were.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, man. You're good, bud.
Well, that's a shame. I mean, I don't know why it would be such a I don't know how it affects your experience watching or listening to the show that you thought I was gay and I'm not, and now you're disappointed. But I have actually, the only interesting thing about this is that, right? Like, I don't care. It doesn't bother me whether someone misassesses my sexual orientation. It's really not a big deal. You know, I think we all are making evaluations of people we meet all the time about different characteristics. Really doesn't bother me one bit. My question is, why is the show less interesting if I'm not a gay guy? That is really the question I would like to see answered sooner than later. We've got a great bonus show for you today. I'm back on the bonus show. Pat did a great job the last few days filling in for me on the bonus show. I will be back today. We will talk about a showdown about LGBTQ employment rights that is heading to the Supreme Court. We will talk about a local story here in the Boston area. A National Grid employee has been fired. It was a Trumpist wearing a Trump hat who confronted a woman in nearby Belmont over her bumper stickers. We will also talk about the disturbing rise of deep fake videos online. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. And remember, this weekend, massive membership fund drive. If you want to support the show, you want to do it at the lowest rate of the year. We are doing a one-day membership special this weekend. People will be notified by email. Get on our newsletter at davidpakman.com. You will get an email this weekend with a one-day opportunity to cash in on an extremely inexpensive membership for the year.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.